Welcome to The Debate. Today, we're diving into the spiritual heart of the Book of Testimony, a foundational text of ancient Israel, to explore a really fascinating tension, the line between divinely sanctioned spiritual practices and what is strictly forbidden as priestcraft or abomination. Our core question, really, is this. Does the Book of Testimony draw a consistently clear distinction between Israel's unique holy rituals, like, say, the priestess's celestial readings or the consecration of the cherub, and the condemned practices of foreign nations? Or do these sanctioned acts, dangerously echo what YHVH explicitly prohibits? My position is that the text offers a precise, divinely revealed blueprint for Israel's spiritual path, unambiguously setting their holy practices apart from the defiling actions of other peoples.
At very clarity today, because I see some unsettling resemblances between, some of these described practices and the forbidden abominations. And that raises, for me, serious concerns about how consistent and distinct these lines truly are within the text itself.
Okay, the Book of Testimony, given by Yahweh to Moses and Zipporah, it meticulously lays out a sacred set of spiritual practices for Israel, and I believe it always clearly differentiates them from the abominations of other nations. These aren't meant to be dangerous acts. They're actually essential pillars of Israel's covenant with Yahweh. For instance, let's consider the role of celestial observation. Yahweh explicitly instructs the daughters of the Levites to read the night skies and divine the letters. That's part of their service in the tabernacle, detailed right there in chapter 19. Now, this isn't astrology as we might, commonly understand it. It's about understanding divine order. Chapter 39 goes further, explaining that the high priestess teaches other priestesses the readings of the firmament and the expanse of the heavens, revealing nothing less than the secrets of Ha-Elohim, as chapter 38 puts it. So this celestial observation, it's a core, divinely sanctioned role for female spiritual leaders. It underscores a kind of theological sophistication where the source of power, Yahweh himself, rather than just its manifestation, defines its holiness. And then you have the consecrated objects. The cherub of truth, this sacred ceremonial sword, it's described in chapter 30 as a direct gift from Yahweh, by which the creation is revealed and every miracle is performed. The meticulous fasting, bathing, and prayer rituals required to obtain it are explicit instructions from Yahweh, signifying divine approval. Chapter 32 provides these really detailed 7-step processes for consecrating garments, rods, swords, cups. Their holiness is then confirmed by a divine light blue for peace, red for purity, which grants powers like calling elements or revealing wisdom. These are tools for Yahweh servants, not pagan magic. Even the seer, Bichozeh, is stated to be greater than a prophet in chapters 33 and 41. He uses a gazalem, a specific seer stone, to reveal things which have passed and also of things which are to come, and secret things be made manifest. Again, this is presented as a validated form of divine insight. And finally, specific rituals like the Tukashe for women, which channels their passions for petitions, that's chapter 40, or calling upon the heavens to speak with the moon or with the stars for wisdom, chapter 42, these are explicitly detailed within the covenant. They are direct divine instructions, not human invention, guiding Israel to YHVH's will.
Okay, I acknowledge the emphasis on direct divine instruction. I do. But while the text certainly outlines practices for Israel, a closer look, I think, reveals a troubling ambiguity. It often blurs the line between these sanctioned rituals and the abominations and priestcraft that Yahweh vehemently condemns. And that poses, I believe, a significant risk of syncretism and confusion for the people. Take chapter 3, for example. It explicitly forbids making any image or likeness of anything that is in the heavens above to worship. Now, while celestial readings are described, the text doesn't clearly draw the fine line between observing Yahweh's signs and potentially idolizing celestial bodies or relying on them in a forbidden manner. This ambiguity, perhaps it's not a flaw. Maybe it actually serves as Yahweh's constant test of Israel's heart intent, forcing a deeper devotion than just, rote ritual observance. And furthermore, Chapter 7 unequivocally condemns familiar spirits, necromancers, omens, and the footnotes explicitly link omens to astrology, enchantments, and priestcraft or keshef. Now, many of the sanctioned practices you mentioned, the priestess's celestial observations, the chosee's use of gazalim stones, these rituals to discern hidden knowledge, they share, let's be honest, a common methodological approach with these forbidden acts. Think about the prohibition against cooking a kid in its mother's milk. It's labeled an abomination in Priestcraft in chapters 5 and 15. This highlights that spiritual danger isn't always obvious, right? It can lie in subtle associations with foreign traditions, even for seemingly innocuous actions. So that sets a precedent for scrutinizing other practices that might mimic pagan rites. Chapter 33 also warns Israel not to retain signs and wonders of pagan or foreign magics, lest they fall into darkness. This strongly suggests that not all miraculous or revelatory experiences are from YHVH. Discernment is paramount, yet the text itself, I argue, can make this discernment difficult. Then there's the interaction with Malachim, these divine messengers in chapter 34. It includes a stark warning. If the Malach saith yea, then he be a deceiver and is not of YHVH. This implies even seemingly divine spiritual interactions can be dangerous if not perfectly aligned with YHVH's true will, further blurring the lines of acceptable engagement. And the detailed, almost formulaic instructions for some sanctioned rituals, like consecrating items in chapter 32 or the women's petitions in chapter 40, they mirror the structured nature of condemned sorcery, making the practical distinction for an ordinary Israelite, well, quite challenging, without explicit divine intervention.
I hear your argument, I do, but the appearance of overlap is troubling. But the text offers a clear framework for discerning Yahweh's writing in the heavens from forbidden celestial omens. You emphasize the danger in speaking with the moon or stars, but consider chapter 38 again. It explicitly states that the Sabbaths are known by the stars in the heavens and by the moons, and these tell us the seasons and the secrets of Ha-Elohim. Priestesses are specifically tasked with watching these celestial bodies and telling the signs and the seasons, and the high priestess teaches the readings of the firmament. That's chapter 39. Look, this isn't about seeking forbidden omens from independent celestial forces. It's about reading Yahweh's divine order, precisely because, as chapter 2 says, the word of Ha-Elohim is written upon the skies. The distinction lies not in the act of observation itself, but in the source of the instruction and the intent.
It's Yahweh Vehe guiding his people to understand his creation, not human will seeking divination from foreign gods. We are given specific, covenantal instructions how to read, how to interpret.
But you emphasize the source and intent, advocate, I get that. But when chapter 7 explicitly condemns omens, Nahash, and links them to astrology, how does reading the night skies, as chapter 19 puts it, or speaking with the moon or with the stars from chapter 42, how does that avoid that exact label in the eyes of an average Israelite, especially given the visual and methodological similarities? The caution in chapter 3 against bowing down to any image or likeness of anything that is in the heavens above implies a real danger in placing too much focus or reliance on celestial bodies, even if they are seen as God's creation. And the text does provide strong warnings against signs and wonders that lead Israel astray. That's chapter 33 again, suggesting that even a divinely designed system can be misused. It can be misinterpreted in ways that dangerously parallel forbidden practices. The problem for me isn't just the theoretical distinction you're drawing, but the practical, lived experience of the people. How do they consistently differentiate?
That concern about practical discernment is valid, yes, but the text provides the solution, divine confirmation. Which brings us to the next point, the efficacy and legitimacy of consecrated objects versus forbidden priestcraft. You've drawn a parallel between the rituals surrounding the cherub and other items and what the text condemns as keshef, or enchantments. But isn't there a fundamental, observable difference here? The cherub of truth and these other items, they aren't just charms. They are presented as vessels of divine power. Their holiness, described clearly in chapter 32, is confirmed by a direct manifestation of Yahweh's presence, the descent of a blue or red light. This isn't portrayed as human manipulation, it's divine sanction. The ability to call upon the winds, or the rain, or the hail with a consecrated rod, or to gain wisdom from a cup, or prophecy from a cloak. Chapter 32 explicitly states these things. It's a testament to Yahweh granting power to those who purify themselves according to His exact instructions. This is about stewardship over divine gifts, not engaging in sorcery or enchantments, forbidden in chapter 7, which are fundamentally human-initiated attempts to manipulate spiritual forces outside Yahweh's covenant. That divine light, that's the ultimate undeniable differentiator.
Observable by whom, though, and how reliably? You highlight the divine light as the ultimate differentiator. Okay, but chapter 32 also mentions a green light, indicating impurity, requiring the ritual to be repeated. Doesn't that suggest a fallibility, or at least an ambiguity in the very sign meant to distinguish divine from profane? Doesn't that make it profoundly difficult for the average Israelite to truly discern? The detailed, almost formulaic rituals for consecrating these objects, the specific fasting, bathing, even that explicit inscription on the cherub mentioned in chapter 32, they bear, I maintain, a striking resemblance to the very keshef and enchantments condemned by Yahweh in chapter 7 and 41. Couple that with the warning against deceptive malachim in chapter 34, if the malach saith yea, then he be a deceiver and is not of Yahweh. It highlights the fragility and the potential for error in these practices.
Or repetition. Well, how is an Israelite to differentiate? It almost becomes a test of implicit trust rather than explicit clarity, doesn't it?
That's a powerful point about the risks, the potential for deception, and the challenge for the average person. I acknowledge that. It pushes us to look even closer at Yahweh's precise instructions and the whole context of the covenant itself. So let's turn now to the role of priestesses and these gendered rituals, particularly in light of the prohibitions on whoring after other gods. The book clearly empowers priestesses with significant spiritual authority, interpreting dreams, overseeing purification rites. It's all there in chapters 42, 47, 48, 49, 50. Now, regarding the tu kashe ritual in chapter 40, where a woman writes her desires on a red bowl, uses water and myrrh, pours a libation after intimate union with her husband, specifically to channel the strength of thy passions for divine petitions, you suggest a dangerous similarity to pagan fertility cults. But I see this as a sacred, intimate covenantal act. It's between a wife, her husband, and Yahweh, seeking fertility and blessings within the covenant. It's fundamentally distinct from whoring after their Elohim, like in chapter 5, verse 20, which is condemned for foreign nations and unfaithful Israelites. The key difference is its intent, rooted firmly in the covenant with Yahweh, and it's explicitly instructed for His people. The context of covenantal fidelity is absolutely paramount here. It's not about what it might look like from the outside, but what it is within the divinely established framework.
I understand the emphasis on covenantal intent, advocate. I really do. But I'm just not convinced that the tu kashesh ritual is so clearly distinct in practice, especially for the people living it. The description involving a woman's passions, her union with her husband for petition, chapter 40, it bears an undeniable resemblance to fertility cults, or maybe even ritual prostitution, things common in surrounding pagan religions. And YVH consistently condemns those practices as whoring after their Elohim. Chapters 5, 13, 20, 22 are full of it. Given the extreme punishments for adultery in chapter 14, and for profaning oneself with other Elohim in chapter 20, and, well, the severe consequences for an unfaithful wife in that jealousy test in chapter 44, the text itself demonstrates the incredibly high stakes. It shows the potential for misunderstanding, maybe even abuse, in gendered spiritual practices that touch upon sexuality and procreation.
This makes the distinction from abominations critically important, yet I think implicitly vulnerable. For the ordinary Israelite living among these other cultures, the surface similarities could easily blur that line, creating a profound spiritual danger
regardless of the stated divine origin or the intended purity.
While the nuances of Israel's spiritual life are certainly profound, and yes, they demand careful study, the source material I maintained consistently emphasizes Yahweh's direct instruction as the ultimate guide, along with the pure intent behind these practices. They are presented not as human inventions or mere imitations of pagan rites, but as sacred pathways to divine power and knowledge, given specifically to a holy people for their preservation and prosperity within the covenant. The meticulous details aren't signs of occultism, they're signs of divine precision, required for purity and efficacy. The text, in my view, ultimately aims to guide and clarify, not to confuse. This implies perhaps a theological sophistication where the source of the power, Yahweh, rather than just its manifestation, defines its holiness, a subtle, yes but crucial distinction for understanding Yahweh's relationship with creation.
And conversely, I believe the striking similarities between some of these sanctioned rituals and the condemned abominations, alongside Yahweh's very explicit warnings against false gods and priestcraft, demands a profound and constant vigilance from the reader, and presumably from the ancient Israelite. The text presents a persistent challenge, I think, to truly discern between Yahweh's will and practices that could lead Israel astray. This inherent ambiguity, maybe it isn't a flaw. Maybe it actually serves as Yahweh's constant test of Israel's heart intent, pushing for a deeper, less superficial devotion than simple ritual observance could ever achieve. It implies perhaps that true devotion might lie more in clear ethical observance and a pure heart than in complex, potentially ambiguous ritualistic acts. The Book of Testimony, therefore, it leaves us, I think, with the ongoing task of discernment, urging a deep understanding of both the spirit and the letter of Yahweh's law to navigate this very intricate path of faith.